Assalamu alaikum, guys. Good afternoon.
Waalaikumsalam, Doktor.
Waalaikumsalam, Doktor.
Okay, guys. Can you hear my voice clearly?
Okay, Doctor.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so once again, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, today we will resume our classes with chapter 4. Inshallah, I will be explaining to you about chapter 4. And inshallah, for the following two, chapter 5 and 6, I will assign it like the last time. So you can do it as a presentation and you can prepare for it. First of all, let's get in with chapter 4, and after that, chapter 5 and 6 next week. And after the next week, inshallah, we'll discuss about your midterm, whether you want it after chapter 6 or should we go further with the classes. Also, we'll be discussing assignment, individual and group assignment, and also I think this is the plan for now and for the next week. Okay. So I believe the last time the chapters were given to you was chapter 2 and chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yep. Okay. So today, inshallah, we'll get into chapter 4. So just let me share my slide. Okay. I believe you can see my screen, right? Okay. Okay. So inshallah today we'll be talking about one database model, or in the previous weeks you guys have been talking and presenting about the relationship in databases, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, what are these relationships? And also we discuss about the different entity relationship modeling techniques. We have discussed about the AR, the ARD diagram, and so many. And today, inshallah, we'll be getting into the AR diagram or the AR modeling. We'll be discussing what is it, how it is used, and how we can integrate it and use it in making our own database. At the end of the day, we will be database developers, meaning what? We have to develop a database for our customer needs or for our corporation or for whatever purpose we have. In that regard, we need to use modeling technique to create the database. And the most famous one is like the AR or the ARD diagram. So we'll be discussing the main characteristics of the entity relationship, AR, and also how the relationships between the entities are defined and incorporated into the database design process. First of all, what are entities? We'll be defining what are our entities and what are the relationship between these entities and how the ARD component will have impact on the design and the implementation. And the database design also require the conciliation of conflicting goals. Okay, here what you are trying to say is it depends on the goal of your corporation or your customer when you design your database. So it is better from the beginning of your database development process and even design to identify your goals, to identify what are the requirements, to identify for which personnel, company, business you are making this database to. Okay, so the AR model or the AR entity relationship. Okay, so in ERD modeling as a technique, we have three main important or the three main components. It's called entities, and we have attributes, and we have relationships. What are entities? What are attributes? What are relationships? Entities, it refer to the set and not to a single entity occurrence. Meaning what? We have a main object in our database. That object or that thing is called entity. And that entity correspond to a table and not to a row in a relation environment. Meaning what? If we have entity, the entity, it will refer to one table. So one table represent one entity, okay? And inside this table, we have different values. These values are not entities. These values are occurrences of that entity. When we are using the model for chin and crow, the entity represented by a rectangle with entity name, and the entity name should be a noun written in capital English letters. Okay. Attributes. Attributes is how you characterize an entity. Meaning what? Let's say my entity is my car, for example. What are the attributes to characterize this car? The price of the car, the color of the car, the manufacturing year of the car, the name of the car, the name of the model, the passenger capacity, the fuel consumption of the car. All these are attributes which we can use to characterize our entity. Okay, so if I want to say our student is an entity, can you guys write for me in the chat what are some attributes can be characterizing for student? If a student is entity, what are the characteristics for the student? Can you suggest some in the chat?
Gender.
Yes, gender is one entity, name is one entity, a name is one attribute, gender is another attribute, metric ID, because we are talking about student, semester, how many credit hour the student has, GPA, CGPA, all these are, what do you call it, attributes for that entity, okay? So entity is like the big umbrella. Inside it, we have different attributes. These attributes can be used to define our entity. Okay, so now do we understand what is the difference between entity and what we call it, and attributes?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, sir.
Okay, give me the attributes for what you call it for. Okay, let me try to pick up something. Class. Entity for a class. A class is an entity. Give me what are some of the suggested attributes we can use. Suggest for me some. Okay, number of students in that class. We have also class name, class ID, class lecturer who's going to give you this class. We have also the class intake 22, 2021. All these are different attributes to discuss or to differentiate between the class. But there is something, guys, you need to understand in defining entities and what you call it, attributes. This is something you guys talked about in the last week, but I don't know if you really understood it or not. But we are going to get through it, inshallah, with the next week. We need to have one attribute in each entity, at least, which is very unique. Why? Because we are going to use this attribute to differentiate between the other values inside. Okay? For example, let me open an Excel file for you to see. It will be easier. Let's give it a second. So guys, are you in Canvas? Any of you is in campus in Tanja Umalim or still at your hometown?
In campus, doctor.
MashaAllah. Everyone is in campus.
Not all.
Majority.
Okay.
Majority.
How come I didn't see anyone in the old campus? Do you guys come to the library in the old campus? Have you been in the old campus?
No, we stay in college because the
We
some
quarantine
of us
right now.
quarantine.
Oh, quarantine. But how long is the quarantine? How long have you been staying in the college?
At least 5 days or something.
Maybe if you just took the dose, the second dose, or the booster, maybe you will need to be quarantined there. But anyway, okay. So for example, guys, let's say this is called, this is entity one. Entity one, this is for, let's say, class. So this table is representing this entity for the class. Then we have another entity for, let's say, student. Entity to student. Okay. So now entity and class is like the main thing, is like the main object. Here in the entity for the class, which are the items we discuss? By the way, if we want to make entity, it has to be, as the rule stated, all capital. The name of the entity. Okay. In class entity, what are the attributes we discuss about it? We said class name, class name, class ID, class capacity, class take, class lecturer. Okay, guys. Okay, class name, let's say data page NKD. No, class ID is NKD 2022, for example. Class capacity 40 students. Class intake 2022. Class lecturer. Allah. Okay. Okay, guys. Can you tell me these? What are these? Are these attributes or entities? What do you think?
And I think that's entity.
No, the entity is here. This is the entity.
Oh, I
The
see.
entity is the main one,
Oh,
and the
attribute.
characteristics are, let's say, the attributes to define this entity. Okay? So here we have class name is one attribute, class ID one attribute, class capacity one attribute, class intake, class lecturer. Which, of course, if we have class, it means we are not only talking about database. We want to create classes for all courses in FSKIK. So maybe software engineering. This is another class. Let's say AI, artificial intelligence. AI 2022, 90 students, 2021, 2022. Okay. Up to, let's say, for example, Osama. Okay, guys. Which of these attributes can be used as unique attribute to define? Come again?
Class ID.
Yeah, the class ID. So the class ID in this case in database, we call this class ID something called PK. PK means what? Primary key. Primary key. PK is primary key. Primary key, we use it in the database to distinguish, because this code will not be repeated again. Maybe if we go back to OPSI, or let's say, for example, if we go to for other course, there is no other course which is taking this ID except database. So database is unique by this course. Okay, but for example here we have database, and we have this one is, let's say, MTN 2022. What is the difference between this database and this database? Can you guys tell me? By the way, they are not the same database.
The class ID is different.
Yeah, not only the class ID. When we say MKD, MKD mean only for diploma student. So this database, we teach it also for degree students, but we don't teach the same things. We teach more advanced. But both courses are called database management or database management system. So how do I differentiate diploma database from degree database? Using the code. Okay. So here, when we have something unique to define our entity or to define attributes inside our entity, this is called primary key. And also we have something later on, inshallah, we'll go through, is called foreign key. And this is something later on we're going to discuss. So here, when we talk about attributes, it's characteristics of entities. So here the class is entity. We have all these characteristics to describe this entity. Chain notation attributes represented by oval shape connected to entity rectangle with the line. This is for the drawing. I will show it to you. Each oval contains the name of attribute it represents. Crowfoot notation attribute written in attribute box below entity rectangle. So this is our entity. As you can see, it is written in capital letter. And here we have this attribute. We have this attribute, another attribute, and another attribute, then the last attribute. So here, even when you write student, we can use it using Crowfoot model or chain model. Both of them are the same, but we have different way of doing the figures and representation. Okay. So here, the rectangle or this shape is only for entity. This oval shape is only for attributes. So all the attributes which are related to this entity must be connected with this line. Okay. By the way, when you write your attributes name, you cannot leave any space. So I cannot put STU for student, then space initial. No, you cannot do this in database. You have to leave no space empty. Okay. So for the attributes, required attributes must have a value. So whenever you are designing your database for, let's say, a particular business, and you have this entity that you created, when you create, let's say, what do you call it, attributes, you need to use only the useful attributes which you are going to use, and each of these attributes must be with one value at least. You cannot leave any null value. Optional attribute may be left empty. So here we have required attributes which must have a value, and the optional attribute might be left empty. For example, let me give you a required attribute, an optional attribute in our daily life. When you go register in a website, in any website, let's say, for example, what are the required attributes for the website entity, for registration entity? We have entity for registration because we are using database. You are entering your details, and the details will be stored in the database of the website. So we have registration entity. What are the required attributes in your opinion? What do you think? Write for me in the chat. What are some of the required attributes you need to have in your website registration? Email, password, good. Name, good. Username. So these are all required attributes. Can you give me example of non-required attributes? Meaning what? Attributes you can leave empty and you still can register. Can you give me some examples? Number,
Edge.
age, address. Yes, address. Of course, address. Sometimes they have one address one and address two. Maybe you can only do address one, but address two you don't need to do. So these are like different examples on what are some of the required attributes and optional attributes. And it is your job as a database designer or developer to take into consideration in my website, in my database, what are the most important attributes which I cannot leave empty, and what attributes can be used, but at the same time maybe can be overlooked. They don't need to be inserted inside your database or in your website or application later on. Okay, and after that we need to consider something is the domain of the values in attributes. Meaning what? Here guys, what is the domain for this class capacity? What do you think? The domain is like, what are the expected values you need to put here? Can I put here in the class capacity here? Sometimes I use number, sometimes I use another number, then I use 40. And I use it like this. 50, okay, another 67. Can I mix it like this? What do you think?
No.
I think
Mm.
Yeah. So this is not a really good practice. Here you need to define the domain of what are the expected values. So here you cannot use 40 because 40 is text. Even though 40 is correct, 40 is like the same 40, but here it is written in text. And here our domain is only number. So we need to make it 40 and here 67. Okay. For example, okay, here, okay, MKD database. Here you are only can select a year. For example, can you put 2023? Guys, in your current intake, can you do this? Yes. No, we are talking about your intake for this course for database now.
No.
So this one cannot be used because it is not there yet. Okay. Another example. For our class capacity in OPSI, for any class, maximum student can be in one class, let's say for example 100. Okay? This is like the maximum capacity. After every student come and ask for special permission, we can have maximum 100 in one group. If I come and put 290 in one group, I enter. Will this be allowed or not? What do you think?
No.
I couldn't hear you guys.
Is out of capacity.
Still, I
No.
didn't. No, the answer is no. Why? Because here it is not within the domain. Because here we cannot allow more than 100 students in one group. Okay, I will give you one easy example. When you go register in a website, they will ask you for, of course, password. Can you tell me some of the domain for the password? Just in your opinion, when you go register on website, what are some of the domain set of possible value for attributes? Some of the restriction, what do you think they could be?
Not less than 8.
Perfect answer. Not less than 8, let's say, number. Okay. This is a good answer. This is the answer I wanted. Let's say another domain we can use. So your password cannot be only numbers. You have to use ABC letters and number. Maybe here mix number and numbers, letter and character, for example. Here mix number and letter. And here mix number and letter meaning A, B, C. Okay, we finish this one. And then we have to put special character. So this is the domain of your, let's say, of your attributes. What are the expected values? How the expected values should be there? If we enter a value which is not expected, will the database store this value, or it will reject it and go bring back, or let's say send back an error? And then we have something called identifier. It is one or more attribute that uniquely identify each entity instance. Okay, I will show you how this is working. For example, here we have stu f student first name, and then we have stu l name. We have stu, for example, and then we have date of birth. If we have this kind of attributes, for example, let's say here we have Naufal, and here we have Ahmed, and here we have Abdullah, and here we have Rosna, and here we have Aisha, and here we have Jesse, for example, and here also we have Jesse, another Jesse, we have also Rosna, and here we have another Abdullah. Okay, so here guys, when we have the first name by itself, let me continue. Naufal, Ahmad, his last name, Ahmad, his last name is Ismail, Abdullah, Amudi, Rosna, Ibrahim, Aisha, Muhammad, Jesse, Young, Jesse, Kelvin, Rosna, Saeed, Abdullah, Hussein. Here gender we have N. Okay. Can I use this to define our entity, or to define this complete row in my entity? Guys, what do you think? If I use only the first name and let's say this name, can I use it to define unique record for this person? If I want to go and look for someone, his name is Abdullah. Let's say I want to search for our Naufal, the one with us in the group. If I use only the first name, is it enough?
No.
Yes.
No.
How come? How come? The one who said yes. Can you tell me why?
Because there's only one Naufal in the first name of the list.
Okay, that's good. Let's say, for example, this is your class. Let's say, for example, after a few weeks, someone joined the class late, and his name was also Naufal. At this stage, can you make sure that no one will come and no other Naufal in the world will come and register in this class?
No.
No.
So only the first name cannot be used in differentiating, or let's say making someone unique. And here, in that case, okay, can we use the gender Naufal and male? Can we see another Naufal, another male? Yes, of course. Date of birth, maybe Naufal is 1997. Maybe we'll see another Naufal. He is male and he is 1997, and maybe he even was born in the same city. We can find this. But in that case, for us, when we create the database, we need to have other attributes. In this case, we will have Naufal Ahmed. This is composed name. So it will be Naufal Ahmed, born in 1997. Okay? So in this case, it will be more unique to identify. Sometimes you can find many people having the same first name, but they don't have the last name. Sometimes you will find Naufal Ahmed, and you will have another, let's say, for example, Naufal Ahmed male, he was born in 1997. In the same year, we have Naufal and his father is Ahmed. This is, we have 9 billion people around the world, so this can happen. Okay, for example, we have only two names. For my name, in my family, if I'm talking about me as Abdullah, my name is Abdullah, my father name is Hussein, my grandfather name is Abdullah, his father is Hussein, and then we have our great grandfather is Abdullah, and our last name is Alamidi. This is my full name. I was born, let's say, in 1991. I found someone in my city, from my country, he has these same names, but he was born in 1992. So even sometimes these names will not be enough to differentiate. It depends from one case to another case. Sometimes you need to have more attributes to define. Okay, for example, let me tell you this. I want you to tell me just theoretically, how many people in Malaysia named Muhammad? Okay, how many? Let's say, for example, 1 million. Okay, how many people in Malaysia named Muhammad? And let's say, first of all, the first criteria or attribute is name Muhammad. What is how many people name Muhammad in Malaysia? For example, we have 9 million, for example. Okay, so now Muhammad, name Muhammad. Okay, name Muhammad. Okay, how many people? Okay, let's make this name Muhammad 9 million. Okay. How about if we say the name is Muhammad and let's say born in 1997? How many are we going to have in this case? We're going to have, for example, maybe 1 million. Okay, now I want to take this attribute. I want to add another. Okay, born in 1991 and born in KL. Here, one. How many people named Muhammad born in 1997 in Kuala Lumpur? Let's say, for example, 5K. If we take this, born in KL and study in OPSI, another attribute or another criteria. We have only 3, I think 500, for example. Okay. Okay. If we take this study in OPSI and FSKIK, we have then around 100. And then we take the criteria, we include more attributes, FSKIK, studying software engineering, and then we have only 25 Muhammad. And then we make more criteria. After software engineering, married, then we have maybe 5 Muhammad, and then after he married, let's say, for example, His wife name is Aisha. What do you want? So guys, do you understand the concept here? How we come from very general into very specific? Sometimes we only include two attributes to define, but sometimes the scope will be very large. Sometimes we have to include more attributes until we find who we are looking for. So this is in database. Sometimes we need to have as much as attribute as possible, and at the same time, some attributes will be let's say very easy, will be let's say complicated. It depends. So here in database, these attributes will uniquely identify each entity instance, meaning what? This is all for Muhammad, for only one record. The same thing, if we apply, it will give different result. It will give different for Jesse. It will give different for Abdullah Hussein or Abdullah Al-Amoudi. So these identifiers will differentiate who is in this entity we are looking for. Composite identifiers, we talk about them. How many identifiers, like these 2 or 3 identifier, 4 identifier, 6 identifier. How many identifier can we use to differentiate? Okay. So here we have the class code. The class code here, okay, entity for the class. Do we have anything similar? 20, 19, 18, 16, 14, 30. Okay, the class code here is unique. So it will be, let's say, sufficient for us to use the class code as our primary key. Here we have the CRS code, I think ACCT 11, let's say AC10, AC20. These are like the different class codes. And here we have the class section. We have class time, we have room code, we have profile number. So we have different ways of representing our attributes inside our entity. So the composite attribute can be subdivided. So even that we have attribute which is composite, we can also make it subdivided. Give me a second, guys. دكتور حبيبي تعطيني بس 10 دقائق بس اكمل الكلاس وارسل لك اياه لانه والله بنص كلاس اكمل وارسل لك اياه. Okay, then we have simple attribute cannot be subdivided. Composite attribute can be subdivided. Simple attribute cannot be divided. Single value attribute can only have a single value. Multi-valued attribute can have so many values. Now I will show you what is the difference between them. Okay, carbon, multiple values. What does this mean, guys? In English? Garisan, what does it mean?
2 lines means
more than 2 values.
Nilai berganda.
If I know, I can read, but I don't know what does it mean. Okay, anyway, we will get through it. Okay, a multi-value attribute in an entity. The carbon here is like the primary key, the big key, the big key. The car code, okay, the model code, the car here, and the car color. The car color here, because it has 2 values, that's why we have 2 lines. So here, I know this attributes, even before I know what is the value inside, can have more than 1 value. Why? This attribute will be multi-valued attribute because it has 2 lines. Okay? And then we have in money and relationships, and multi-value attribute should not be implemented. So it is not really a good thing in, let's say, in money relationship. If you want to do multi-value attribute, it's better to, let's say, avoid it. We have to create several new attributes for each of the original multi-valued attributes components. Create new entity composed of original multiplier attributes components. So here what we are trying to say is, it is not good to make one attribute with 2 value or 3 values, but it is better to make one attribute for the color number 1, one attribute for color number 2. We make it 2 attributes. Okay. We have here something called derived attribute. What do we mean by derived attribute? Derived attribute is an attribute which can be calculated from other attributes. For example, we have here entity, a new entity for, let's say, baby, new baby. Here we can say the like baby name, baby weight, then we have date of birth, exact date, hospital, weight, date, height. Okay, and then we have here BMI, and here we have age. Okay, baby name, for example, Simon, for example. Baby weight 0.5 kg when he was born. His date of birth is, let's say, for example, 20 February 2022. Hospital is like KPJ. Weight, maybe we already have the weight. Height is like if I think maybe 30 centimeter. Let's see, 30 centimeter. BMI, we didn't have the value. Age, we didn't have the value. Okay, guys. Here I only have to enter these values, but I want to discuss what are derived attributes. So derived attribute can be calculated from other attributes. So here, can I calculate the BMI from these values? What do you think?
Can.
Yes. So we have formula. I think the formula is, let's say, for example, height divided by height. So this is the formula to do our, let's say, general text. Yeah, this is the formula to calculate the BMI, meaning what? Here we have the height divided by the weight. So we have, I think we have to make it here 0.5, and here we have to put it 30. And then we have to calculate it equals to this divided by this. Ah. Second. Right. We have this divided by this. Yes. So here the BMI, let's make it double do it is 2. Okay, the BMI here is calculated. Here, age, and let's say we have this one is 1 day. So guys, These two attributes will be calculated based on other attributes. So this what are we refer to as derived attributes. So sometimes we will have this attributes. Let's say, for example, if you want to calculate your CGPA, are we going to calculate your CGPA after every time you go to a final exam or final assessment? Or we just create one attribute in the database to calculate it automatically based on your marks? What do you think? Guys, what is your opinion? Hello. Guys, are you with me?
هي that
Do you guys understand what is the different and how we can do a derived attribute?
Yes.
I don't know why everyone seems to be sleepy. Okay, we have derived attribute like the employer age, the same thing we did with the kid. Advantages and disadvantages of storing derived attributes. The advantages, it will save the processing power, it will save data access time, it will make data already available and at the same time always available. Can be used to keep track of historical data. The disadvantage, it will require constant maintenance. It will require that the value is, let's say, is current, new, and can be, let's say, for example, used in the calculation changes. Then we have something called relationships. Relationships are like the association between entities, meaning what? Here I have this entity and I have this entity. These are different entities with different attributes. How can I link these two entities? I will use relationships. So the participants are entities that participate in a relationship. What is the relationship between the class and the student? The relationship is like the student is going to attend the class. This is from the student to the class. What is the relationship of the class to the student? The relationship will be the class will be occupied by many students. So this is like an example for how the relationship works. The relationships between entities always operate in omnidirection or in both direction, meaning what? Sometimes we have relationship from class to student, and sometimes we'll have student to class. So this is a must. Relationship can be classified as one to many. Number one meaning one, then M means many. How are we going to reflect this on real life? Here we have entity of the class and we have student. One student can go to many classes and one class can be taken by many students. The relationship classification is difficult if we only know one relationship between the entities or one side. So we need to have both sides to understand the relationship. So we have something called connectivity and cardinality. So the connectivity, it will describe the classification of the relationship, and cardinality, it will require you to understand what is the minimum and maximum number of occurrences associated with the entity. And then it will be established by very concise statement known as business rules. So how do I define my cardinality? For example, I have one entity for student. I have one entity for class. How do I define how many students is going to how many class and how many class can be taken by how many students? This is called cardinality. How can we define this? We are going to use something called business rules. Okay? Here we have something called, we have a professor, one entity for the professor, and here we have one entity for the class. So here the professor is now is one professor can teach one class and can teach four classes, and one class can be taught by one professor, and four classes can also be taught by one professor. Guys, are you still with me, or you need a 5 minutes? Do you guys want 5 minute break?
Yes.
Okay, okay, go take 5 minute break, and we'll come back around 4:28. Okay? Yeah, okay, guys. Go take 5 minutes
All
break.
right, sir.
Okay. Yalla guys, Assalamu alaikum again. Let's carry on.
وعليكم السلام sir.
Salam, doctor.
Okay. We have something called in database existing dependence. Okay, and we have independence, meaning what? An entity existed in a database only when it is associated with another related entity occurrence. Meaning what here? Maybe this is not really something we will apply in our database development, but it is something you need to understand and later on maybe use in your future. Sometimes when we design a database, we have an existing dependence, let's say, relationship. So this relationship will only be related when we have entity occurrence of the database. And at the same time, we have independence. So meaning what? The entity will exist apart from one or more related entities. Meaning what? Here, this entity can be created if it's only linked with another entity. But here, the entity will be there even if it's not related to any other entity. So here, it doesn't require any other entities for this to be created. But here, it will require. And also for the relationship, we have weak relationship and we have strong relationship. The weak relationships is like the non-identifying. What is the condition for having the weak relationship? If the primary key is related to entity does not contain a BK component of parent entity. And also if it's a strong relationship when the BK of a related entity contains BK component of parent entity. Meaning what? I have two entities, one for class and one for student. I need to connect these two entities, so I need to have a strong relationship. I need to have one key or one attribute shared between these two entities so it can connect them together. Okay. Here guys, if you can see, we have course and class. What attributes is there between the two entities which is common, the same, making this relationship strong or weak? What do you think it was? It is. Do we have any attribute which is shared by both? Now guys, what do you think? Guys, look at the CRS code. What do you think about the CRS code?
Different.
The SRS code here, it is the primary key. And here it is the same attribute name. It's called foreign key. So we have the attribute. This one will be connected with this one, and therefore it will connect both entities together. Weak entities, if you need to have a weak entity, there must be two conditions. It must be existing dependent, so it depends on another entity to be created, and the primary key is partially or totally derived from parent entity relationship. So here for the employee, it is like weak relationship. Okay, employee and dependent. Here, the employee, here meaning, let's say, for example, the father. And here the dependent is, let's say, the kid. The kid cannot be there, cannot be created unless his father is there, or let's say, unless he is, let's say, the child is made. So we don't have child unless we have his father. So this is what we call it a weak relationship. So this one cannot be created unless we have this, let's say, relationship or this entity, sorry. And this is the participation. argumentation, degree, binary, no, these are not really important. I think for this title, the occurrence relationship, associated composite entities, okay, developing an easy diagram. Okay. Where are you guys? Okay, this title. Guys, for these three titles, I want each and every one of you to write for me one page about these three titles. And I want this page to be submitted by next week during our class. In addition to the what we call it, to the chapter, I'm going to slide to inshallah today. So what is going inshallah to happen? You have I will give you 1 or 2 chapters to prepare, and I will give you this. I want you to write for me one page explanation about these three items and submit it inshallah next week with the presentation for the slide. It will be also group project. Okay?
Doctor?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes, who said doctor? I think someone is wants to know something.
The task is group assignment, right?
Muhammad Shukri, can you please speak further?
This task is for grouping task, right?
Muhammad, we have two things. The first thing is I sent it on WhatsApp. Now we have three titles. These three titles, every student must give me one page A4 with your metric ID, with your name. You explain about this based on your research from the internet and from the slide. I don't want copy paste from the slide. I want you to explain it in your own words in English. This is number one for individual. For the group, I will give you two chapters for next week. This chapter can be prepared by all the class members, and I will highlight. If I highlight any topic like this, that means the topic you need to prepare it. If I don't highlight it, it means it is not important. So no need to prepare it. I will just highlight the page number. Okay? You can do it as a group and do it in presentation next week. Okay?
Yeah, doctor.
Okay.
Is that clear for everyone?
Sir,
Yes, Naufal. Yes, Muhammad.
what type of one page do we need to do for this assignment? Is it like an essay, or is it like do we need to write as an essay or different?
See, Muhammad, in this one page, there is no, let's say, restriction. There is no specific guidelines. I want to see how are you going to explain it in your own way. Do you want to do it like essay? Do you want to do it like advantages, disadvantages? You want to discuss it as a discussion? It is up to you. I just want these three topics. You discuss about them. I want you to explain them to me like I don't know what they are. I want you to explain them in your own words. I suggest you guys can go to some YouTube videos, just read about them, see some videos, and try to summarize it in your own words. So there is no specific way of doing it. And this is a quiz, not an assignment.
So Does doing in slide counts?
Come again?
Is,
Muhammad,
does
yes, repeat, yes.
doing in the slide counts?
No, it has to be on A4 and it has to be submitted in My Guru before next week class. I will inshallah today upload it in My Guru so you can submit it there.
A4. Okay.
Okay, it will be one page. Let me write the restriction for you. One page, A4, times New Roman font, spacing is 1.5, font size is okay. So these are the only restrictions. You just need to discuss about these three items. There is no, let's say, specific way in doing it. It is up to you how you see fit. It is up to your research what you are going to do, but it will be only one page for the three titles together. So each title is going to take 5, maybe 6 lines maximum of writing. Okay, guys? Hello, only Muhammad Naufal is talking with me, Muhammad Khair is talking with me, and another student, please. Yeah, and also I know Nur Ain, they are the only one who replied.
Okay, doctor.
So for the rest, please do it, submit it by next week, and inshallah I will share the slide with you today, inshallah.
Okay, doctor.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay, doctor.
Take care of yourself, be well, and inshallah we'll see you next week.
Alright, doctor. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you,
Thank you.
doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you,
Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Welcome.
Thank you, doctor.
Welcome.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Welcome.